Okay, folks, welcome to another session of PHI 331. Today, we're going to be continuing our unit on democracy by finally looking at two defenses of democracy. And we're going to find these defenses in the writings of C.L.R. James and John Dewey. So here's our plan for today. I'm going to quickly review some critiques of democracy. Then we're going to look at C.L.R. James's essay, Every Cook Can Govern. And then we're going to make this a two-part video. So the first part video we'll cut off there. And then we'll look at Dewey's essay in video number 2. So let's get to work. So, what are the criticisms of democracy that we've seen so far in the course? Well, if we think way back, when we were thinking about the origins and rationale for the existence of government, we looked at Thomas Hobbes, and we saw an argument in favor of monarchy there. Well, he points out that one reason why we should prefer a monarchy is that if we have a democratic sovereign, that is, rule by all, that was basically Hobbes's definition of democracy, that's going to put us at risk for return to a state of war against all, right? Because a democratic institution runs the risk of the government disagreeing with itself. And then you get factions and disillusion. Plato's Republic, Book 8. You get a similar idea to Hobbes's about the dissolution or devolution of government into tyranny in Plato's case. So remember, a democratic government, according to Plato, is going to lack harmony and justice. And moreover, we're going to find that in democracies, they're inherently bad, according to Plato, because they have no respect for skill or authority. So, like teachers will be more interested in flattering their pupils than exercising the sort of authority that's required, according to Plato, to make sure that they actually learn something. We saw an extension of Plato's arguments in Richard Kraut, who said that democracy is going to be less well run than a group of highly trained experts would be. And remember, these highly trained experts in his proposed new Callipolis. Remember, Callipolis is the name of the just city in Plato's Republic. He says that these sorts of highly trained, civic-minded individuals would do a better job. And then last time around, we saw Brennan's argument that when the government coerces us, we have a right to be governed by competent deliberative bodies. And ordinary citizens have little incentive to become competent. And the way that he puts it is that when it comes to knowledge of economics, the ordinary citizen, as he puts it, knows less than nothing. I also sent around an optional reading called Make Athens Great Again by Rebecca Neuberger-Goldstein. And Goldstein points out that, we should be maybe concerned about democracy because, after all, it did lead to the death of Socrates, because Athenians were way too prideful and were exceptionalists. And that this sort of prideful, exceptionalist groupthink led to the downfall of Athenian greatness. Okay, so now that we've got these criticisms of democracy in mind, we can now move on to, finally, some defenses of democracy. You might be thinking, it's about time, so let's get to it. we're going to be looking at an interesting figure first, a writer named C.L.R. James. So he lived from 1901 to 89 and was Trinidadian. James did anti-colonialist activism in the 30s and advocated for self-government, i.e. non-colonial, non-British based governance for West Indian, that is Caribbean countries. So he was interested in Leninist and Trotskyite theories of Marxism, but he was a strong opponent of authoritarianism and Stalin. But he was into, as you'll see in this essay, defending the idea that workers have a kind of wisdom and authority that needs to be reflected in good governance. And that's how his Marxism comes through there. And he wrote widely on all sorts of things. So he wrote a book about cricket. He wrote a book about the Haitian Revolution called The Black Jacobins. And he also produced a history of the Communist International. But we're going to be looking at his work from 1956 called Every Cook Can Govern, which is supposed to draw some lessons for us about what Athenian democracy has to show us in the present day. So, what did C.L.R. James see in the Athenian city-state? Well, he points out that an important moment in the history of Athens was that Solon, sometimes between 650 and 600 BC, ensured that the laws of Athens would be written down. And this is important. This is sometimes referred to the concept of promulgation. That is the requirement that part of justice in the administration of laws is making sure that the laws are written down such that everybody has at least the opportunity to know what the law is. This is going to protect against tyrannical and arbitrary rule. And then another 100 years later, by 500 BC, Athens was using sortition as a method for choosing the government. So sortition is basically just another way of meaning that leaders are selected by lottery. So if not literally pulling names out of a hat, that's in effect what was being done by sort of randomly picking people. Athens got its leaders. And it was a very detailed system. So Athens was not a large city. It had about 100,000 people in it. But every year, 500 people would handle the administration of the city. So 50 from each of 10 regions. So you could imagine 50 from each district. And then each person from that district is going to be serving for 1/10 of the year. So there's going to be 50 people for the whole city at a single time, with 5 each from each district. So every 10th of the year, you get a new 50 in with an equal representation from each district in the city. And all the work of government, basically all the administration, would take care of this job of leading and running the city. So once you serve in administration, so once you do your 10th of the year, you can never serve again. So there would be experts serving as private citizens on boards and commissions. So these boards and commissions could take complaints about administrators, in terms of managing religious rights, that would be their job. But the idea is like everybody is going to end up serving. So everybody at some point in their life in Athens would basically be one of the 500 from that year. So remember, if Athens was 100,000 people and half a thousand people ended up counseling each year, basically 0.5% of the entire population would be in this position of government administration. And then there would be a strong chance that at some point in your own life, you would spend 1/10 of a year doing that service to the city. We also see democracy in maybe somewhat less significant matters, not just making sure that taxes are collected, but also in the way that they dealt with art and drama. So there would be a yearly festival of plays and tragedies. And what would happen is judges would make their selection of what the best play was. 5 out of 10 of those votes would be pulled from a hat, and that's how the award-winning play would be chosen. But what's really interesting here is that in this kind of setting, James points out that the public was highly influential. So they would, through applause and jeering and so forth, make their preferences known. And if the judges were not responsive to public opinion about what the best plays were, the judges could be impeached. And James points out, it seems like the right plays were chosen. So Aeschylus was one of the great playwrights of Athens, and his plays won in these competitions repeatedly. And moreover, there is room for some expertise. So military leaders could be renewed repeatedly by vote. So you can keep experts around for certain highly skilled jobs. So the example that James focuses on is Pericles, one of the great military leaders in the history of Athens. Well, he served for 30 years because he was such a good leader and so well loved. So the way that Greek democracy is set up, according to James, brought with it a lot of advantages. So one thing that James points out is that direct democracy is anti-bureaucratic. The idea here is that bureaucracy is a bad thing because it makes government not open to everyone. And James, with his Marxist frame of mind, wants to make sure that the institutions of a democracy be open to everyone. And by replacing a democracy with an ever-rotating cast of citizen administrators, James sees this as an opportunity for making government more accessible and open to all. So anti-bureaucracy is going to be one good feature of this Athenian form of democracy. He also points out that by expecting everybody to participate in democracy, he suggests that it shows an extraordinary level of confidence in the ability of an ordinary person. And in this sense, when you have this kind of confidence or faith in people to act well, they do act well. So James points out here that there's a really strong correlation between the flourishing of Greek, or I should have said Athenian, really, of Athenian democracy and advancement in the arts. So, for instance, Pindar, Homer, Aeschylus, Thucydides, Euripides, Herodotus, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Pythagoras, Archimedes. The list of great Athenians is not only long, but the quality of the individuals it can't be understated, is profound, or it can't be overstated, I should have said. It can't be overstated the extent to which these thinkers are important, because not only did they initiate their fields, but they are rightly treated as the greatest in their fields up until nowadays. Plato and Aristotle are rightly thought of as some of the greatest philosophers of all time. In a similar way, Aeschylus and Homer are considered to be some of the greatest creators of literature to have ever lived. So this is an amazing thing. Remember, Athens back then didn't have the financial resources that we have nowadays, and had about half the population of a small city like Winston-Salem. So James tells us that when we carry equality to the extreme, the city produced the most varied, comprehensive, and brilliant body of geniuses that the world has ever known. So the thought here is that there is a non-accidental correlation between setting your city up as a democracy, where you show extraordinary confidence in the ordinary person's ability and profound achievements. He also points out that massive military successes were enjoyed under democracy. So you might know about this film 300, about the Athenian army, a small army of 300 succeeding over a much larger and well-stocked army of Athenians. Well, part of the thought here is that when you have democratic rule, you're going to get the best out of people. So, yeah, the victory against the Persian monarchy is a great example of that. And within this context, James sees it as a profound and important thing that the way that Athenians ran government was to treat it neither as the work of an elite nor work done on the spare time, right? It's actually essential work for all to do, and it's work that ought to be treated as public service. Maybe jury duty would be the closest analogy to the way that we treat it as necessary work in the service of the city and the government. So just to sum up what's going on with James, he says that there are important lessons about equality in Athenian democracy, that there's something profound and important about the thought that everyone is capable of government and leadership, and moreover, as we just saw, democracy has a large role in explaining the success and health of a society. So the fact that a society is able to do great things and that it succeeds in military endeavors can be explained by the fact that they are democracies. And this is a live question still in contemporary debates. This is a book published by MIT Press. So political scientists, in this case, are still thinking about the question of whether democracies really are capable of winning their wars. The thought might be that the reason why the Allies won the Second World War may have been not an accident, in the sense that democracies are more likely to prevail in a military effort than a tyrannical government such as Hitler's Axis. So that's our first phase of looking at defenses of democracy. So we're going to pause here but we're going to pick right up with John Dewey and his different, but in many ways similar and complementary defense of democracy. So, thanks for listening to this first part, and we'll see you in a moment.